In the depths of every person lies a chamber that most fear to enter. The place where truth resides, unfiltered by the opinions of others, unpolished by social expectation, unprotected by comfortable illusions. This chamber is accessed through a practice both ancient and essential: self-reflection. I have spent countless hours in solitude, examining every choice I made, every burden I carried, every consequence I accepted. Through this practice, I learned that the greatest enemy one can face is not found on any battlefield. It is the version of yourself that refuses to look honestly at who you have become and why. Self-reflection is not the luxury of the privileged or the hobby of the philosophical. It is the foundation upon which all wisdom is built, the tool by which all growth is measured, and the compass by which all authentic living is guided. Without it, you drift through life responding to the world from patterns you never chose, carrying baggage you never examined, repeating mistakes you never understood. Today, I share what I have learned about the art of looking inward, not with judgment, but with the clear-eyed precision of a strategist studying a map, seeking to understand the terrain of your own soul. Self-reflection is the practice of turning your attention inward to examine your thoughts, emotions, motivations, and behaviors with honest curiosity. Unlike the mirrors that show you only your physical appearance, this inner mirror reveals the landscape of your character, the patterns that shape your decisions, the fears that limit your actions, the values that guide your choices. But most people avoid this mirror because it cannot be fooled by good intentions or favorable lighting. It shows you exactly what is there: the gap between who you claim to be and who you actually are, the distance between what you say you value and what your actions demonstrate you prioritize. This honesty can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is the only foundation upon which genuine change can be built. The ancient Greek maxim, "Know thyself," is not a suggestion. It is a requirement for anyone who wishes to live deliberately, rather than accidentally. Without self-knowledge, you are like a ship without a compass, moving through life, but never truly navigating it. You may reach destinations, but they will be determined by currents and winds rather than conscious choice. Self-reflection operates on two levels, the macro and the micro. At the macro level, you examine the overall trajectory of your life, whether your path aligns with your deepest values, whether your relationships reflect your authentic self, whether your goals serve your genuine growth or merely satisfy external expectations. At the micro level, you examine specific moments, how you responded to criticism, why you felt threatened by someone's success, what triggered your anger or fear. Both levels are necessary. The macro view prevents you from optimizing tactics while heading in the wrong strategic direction. The micro view prevents you from understanding broad patterns while missing the specific behaviors that create them. Like a skilled strategist, you must be able to zoom out to see the entire battlefield and zoom in to understand each individual engagement. The practice requires what philosophers call observer consciousness, the ability to step back from your immediate experience and watch yourself think, feel, and act with detached awareness. This is not dissociation or emotional numbness. It is the development of an internal witness that can observe your patterns without being completely caught up in them. This witness becomes your ally in understanding why you do what you do, and more importantly, in choosing whether to continue doing it. Not all inward attention is beneficial. There is a crucial distinction between productive self-reflection and destructive rumination, a difference that determines whether your introspection leads to growth or paralysis. Productive reflection is characterized by curiosity, learning, and forward movement. You examine your experiences to extract wisdom, identify patterns to understand their origins, and analyze your responses to develop better strategies for the future. This type of reflection feels energizing even when it reveals uncomfortable truths, because it generates insight and possibility. Rumination, by contrast, is characterized by repetitive thinking that leads nowhere. You replay the same scenarios endlessly, analyzing events you cannot change, imagining different outcomes that cannot be achieved, or criticizing yourself for decisions already made. This mental spinning creates anxiety and depression, while producing no useful insights or constructive changes. The Stoics understood this distinction well. They advocated for regular self-examination, but emphasized that reflection should focus on what can be learned and applied, not on regret or self-punishment. Their practice of evening reflection involved reviewing the day's events to identify areas for improvement, but always with the goal of becoming wiser and more virtuous tomorrow, not dwelling on yesterday's mistakes. To distinguish between productive reflection and harmful rumination, observe the quality of your thoughts. Reflection asks questions that lead to understanding. Why did I react that way? What fear or desire was driving my behavior? How can I respond differently next time? Rumination asks questions that lead to circular thinking. Why am I so stupid? Why did this happen to me? What if I had done something different? Reflection feels like investigation. Rumination feels like persecution. Reflection leads to clarity and resolution. Rumination leads to confusion and agitation. Reflection respects your capacity for growth. Rumination assumes your fundamental inadequacy. When you notice your thoughts becoming repetitive or increasingly negative without generating new insights, that's the signal to shift from reflection to action. Sometimes the most reflective thing you can do is stop reflecting and start engaging with the present moment. Effective self-reflection requires creating the right conditions and approaching the practice with proper technique. Like any skill, it improves with practice and suffers from poor form. Begin by establishing regular time for reflection. This cannot be done effectively while multitasking, or when your mind is agitated by the day's demands. Whether it's morning contemplation before the world awakens, evening review after the day's activities conclude, or dedicated periods throughout the week, consistency matters more than duration. Even 10 minutes of focused reflection yields more insight than hours of scattered introspection. Create an environment that supports honest examination. Physical stillness helps mental clarity. Silence allows your inner voice to emerge above the noise of external demands. Privacy ensures you can explore sensitive topics without concern for others' judgments. Some find writing helpful for organizing thoughts. Others prefer pure mental contemplation. Experiment to discover what conditions allow your most honest and productive reflection. Ask questions that penetrate surface explanations to reach deeper truths. Instead of simply reviewing what happened, explore why it happened. Instead of accepting your initial emotional reaction as final, investigate what beliefs or fears generated that reaction. Quality questions generate quality insights. What pattern am I seeing in my relationships? What am I avoiding that I need to address? Where am I acting from fear rather than wisdom? Practice what the Stoics called objective representation, describing events without the emotional coloring that usually accompanies them. Instead of "that meeting was a disaster, and everyone thinks I'm incompetent," try "I presented my ideas, received critical feedback, and felt embarrassed." This cleaner description allows you to examine what actually happened versus what your fears added to the story. Be willing to discover things about yourself that challenge your self-image. True reflection requires courage, because it may reveal that you're not as rational as you believed, not as generous as you claimed, or not as evolved as you hoped. These discoveries are not failures, they are opportunities. You cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge, and you cannot improve what you will not honestly assess. Remember that the goal is understanding, not judgment. Approach your discoveries with the same curiosity you would bring to studying an interesting phenomenon in nature. You are not on trial, you are conducting research. The harsh critic is not your friend in this process. The compassionate investigator is. Several forces conspire to keep you from seeing yourself clearly, and understanding these obstacles is essential for overcoming them. The ego's protective mechanisms work constantly to maintain a favorable self-image. When confronted with evidence that challenges your preferred self-concept, the mind deploys various defenses. Rationalization transforms questionable behavior into justified responses. Projection attributes your negative qualities to others. Denial simply refuses to acknowledge uncomfortable realities. These mechanisms evolve to protect psychological stability, but they also prevent the honest assessment necessary for growth. Social conditioning teaches you to seek approval and avoid criticism, creating internal censors that edit your self-perception before conscious examination can occur. You learn early to present yourself in socially acceptable ways, and eventually this presentation becomes so automatic that you forget what lies beneath it. Self-reflection requires temporarily disabling these social filters to access your authentic responses and motivations. The pace of modern life discourages the stillness necessary for deep reflection. Constant stimulation keeps your attention focused outward, while busy schedules make introspection feel like an unaffordable luxury. The irony is that without regular reflection, you become increasingly reactive and less effective, making your busy life even more chaotic and demanding. Fear of what you might discover creates resistance to honest self-examination. What if you find that your cherished beliefs are illusions? What if your noble motivations are revealed as clever disguises for selfishness? What if you discover that you've been living someone else's life while neglecting your own authenticity? These fears are understandable, but ultimately counterproductive. Avoiding self-knowledge doesn't eliminate these problems. It just ensures they remain unconscious and therefore unaddressed. Past painful experiences with self-criticism can make any form of introspection feel dangerous. If your inner voice has historically been harsh and punitive, turning attention inward may trigger anxiety or depression. Learning to reflect with compassion rather than judgment is essential for making the practice sustainable and beneficial. The solution to these obstacles is not to eliminate them. Some degree of ego protection and social awareness is necessary for healthy functioning, but to recognize them when they arise and gently work around them. When you notice rationalization, acknowledge it and look deeper. When you feel the urge to judge yourself harshly, pause and approach with curiosity instead. When fear of discovery arises, remember that awareness is always the first step toward positive change. What emerges from consistent, honest self-reflection is nothing less than a fundamental transformation in how you experience and navigate life. The benefits accumulate gradually, but inevitably, like interest compounding in an account you didn't know you had opened. Self-awareness becomes your natural state, rather than an occasional achievement. You begin to notice your patterns as they unfold, rather than only recognizing them in hindsight. This real-time awareness allows you to make course corrections in the moment, rather than cleaning up messes after the fact. You catch yourself falling into familiar traps and choose different responses before they create familiar problems. Emotional intelligence develops as you understand the landscape of your inner world. You learn to recognize the early signs of anger before it erupts, the subtle indicators of fear before it paralyzes, the quiet voice of intuition before louder voices drown it out. This emotional literacy allows you to respond rather than merely react, to choose your emotional states rather than be chosen by them. Decision-making improves dramatically because you understand your true motivations and values, instead of making choices based on what you think you should want or what others expect you to choose. You can align your decisions with your authentic priorities. This alignment reduces internal conflict and increases satisfaction with outcomes, even when they involve difficulty or sacrifice. Relationships deepen because you bring authenticity instead of performance to your interactions. When you know yourself clearly, you can share yourself honestly. When you understand your patterns, you can take responsibility for your contributions to relational dynamics. When you're aware of your triggers, you can communicate about them rather than simply reacting from them. Personal growth accelerates because you develop the ability to learn from every experience. Mistakes become data rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Successes become insights rather than reasons for complacency. Challenges become opportunities to apply wisdom rather than random sufferings to endure. Perhaps most importantly, you develop what I call centered presence, the ability to remain connected to your authentic self, regardless of external circumstances. This centeredness doesn't make you immune to life's difficulties, but it does provide a stable reference point from which to navigate them. You stop being buffeted by every change in weather and become like a mountain that remains steady while seasons change around it. The path I walked required me to examine every aspect of my character, every consequence of my choices, every shadow within my own heart. There were moments when what I discovered about myself was almost unbearable. The recognition of my own capacity for coldness, my willingness to sacrifice relationships for duty, the loneliness that comes from carrying burdens others cannot understand. But it was through this unflinching self-examination that I found the strength to do what was necessary, the wisdom to accept what could not be changed, and the peace that comes from knowing yourself completely. Self-reflection was not a luxury for me. It was survival. Without it, I would have been destroyed by the weight of my choices rather than strengthened by understanding their necessity. Your modern world offers countless distractions from the essential work of self-knowledge. Social media provides endless external dramas to focus on instead of internal exploration. Consumer culture promises that external acquisitions will resolve internal deficits. Busy schedules create the illusion that you don't have time for reflection while ensuring that you remain unconscious of the patterns driving your busyness. But the ancient wisdom remains true. The unexamined life is not worth living. Without self-reflection, you remain a stranger to yourself, living according to programs you never chose, reacting from patterns you never understood, pursuing goals that may have nothing to do with your authentic desires. The mirror of self-reflection does not lie, but neither does it condemn. It simply shows you what is, creating the possibility for conscious choice about what will be. In that possibility lies all hope for growth, wisdom, and authentic fulfillment. Make time for stillness. Create space for honest examination. Ask questions that penetrate your comfortable assumptions. Face what you discover with courage and compassion. Learn from every insight, and apply that learning to how you live. In the silence of honest self-reflection, you will find not the person others expect you to be, but the person you actually are. And in knowing that person completely, their strengths and limitations, their patterns and possibilities, their fears and their authentic power, you will find the foundation for a life lived with intention, wisdom, and unshakable authenticity. The greatest technique is not the ability to see through others, but the courage to see through yourself. Master this, and mastery of all other things becomes possible. The mirror awaits. Look deeply, without fear, without judgment, only with the honest curiosity of one who seeks truth above comfort. What you discover there will set you free.